Good evening from Tokyo. Thank you for joining JICA Ogata Research Institute and UNDP joint webinar, Accelerating Actions Toward the SDGs and Human Security, the Summit of the Future and Beyond. I am Yukari Saito from JICA Ogata Sadako Research Institute for Peace and Development. I will be your guide today. First, let me invite Dr. Akihiko Tanaka, President of JICA, for the opening remarks. Dr. Tanaka, over to you.
Distinguished panelists and honorable participants, thank you for attending today's seminar on accelerating actions toward the SDGs and human security, the Summit of the Future and Beyond. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to UNDP for co-hosting this important event. The world is now confronting compounded crises that could be described as a once-in-a-century circumstance. The combined effects of multiple threats, such as armed conflict, climate change, and economic crisis, have jeopardized progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. In the midst of these challenges, growing attention has been paid to the importance of human security, a state in which all people are free from fear and want and can live in dignity. Arguably, the pledge of the 2030 Agenda to, quote-unquote, leave no one behind, reflects the people-centered ethos of human security. The UN Secretary-General's report on human security, published last January, also emphasizes the significance of human security as I quote, tool to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs, unquote. JICA has promoted human security around the world for more than 20 years. In fact, it became a core part of JICA's mission when the late Madame Sadako Ogata, co-chair of the Commission on Human Security, was appointed JICA's president in 2003. To illustrate how we contribute to human security, let me briefly describe our water-related projects in South Sudan, Uruguay, and Zambia. Water is essential for people's lives, livelihoods, and dignity. This is why several SDGs relate to water. Unfortunately, around 3 billion people currently do not have reliable access to safe and affordable drinking water. More worrisome still, global water demand is expected to grow and exceed global water supply by 40% in 2030. Water scarcity on this scale can increase the risk of forced migration and conflict, as a result, compounding human insecurity. In Juba, the capital of South Sudan, most residents had to use untreated raw water due to lack of infrastructure investment and a prolonged civil war. JICA sponsored the construction of a water supply infrastructure in the city and capacity building for improving its operations. Because of JICA's intervention, now 400,000 people across Juba can readily access safe water necessary for their lives. Water is an essential resource not only for household consumption, but also for industrial use. Therefore, equitable water use requires multi-sectoral coordination. Recognizing this, JICA has been promoting what we call the integrated water resource management approach. In Uruguay, JICA assisted in establishing a new governance mechanism for organizing stakeholders, instilling cooperation among them, and resolving conflicts. This project leveraged scientific evidence from water quality monitoring to foster common understanding. This ultimately led to success in limiting mercury pollution and controlling overall water quality in the Santa Lucia River basin. The Uruguayans are now sharing their experience with neighboring countries facing the similar problems. Extreme weather events like floods and droughts have increased in frequency and intensity due to climate change, posing another growing threat to human security. In response, JICA is strengthening the resilience of vulnerable people. For example, JICA has developed community-based irrigation systems in Zambia and provided management training to smallholder farmers in that country. These efforts mitigate the impact of droughts on farmers, helping to raise their production and incomes. As demonstrated in these three cases, JICA has been tackling water-related threats, applying the human security approach with an emphasis on people-centered, multi-sectoral, prevention-oriented principles. Yet the threats we face today go beyond water. They are becoming more and more complex in scope and severe in their impact. We must not forget that crises cause the vulnerable to suffer most. We must take the call to leave no one behind seriously by promoting solidarity and cross-sectoral cooperation with different stakeholders from a human security perspective. The UN Summit of the Future will convene later this month to chart a course for a brighter future. We hope that today's seminar will capitalize on this momentum by deepening our understanding of the contributions human security can make to achieve the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanaka. Please turn off your camera now. Now we will play a video message from UNDP, co-host of today's seminar.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Mr. Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, I would like to extend our warmest congratulations to the JICA Ogata Research Institute on the launch of its Human Security Today flagship report, focusing on human security, politics, and society under compounded crises. The concept of human security, published 30 years ago, marked a pivotal shift in the security discourse from the security of territories to the security of people. Today, it continues to illuminate development blind spots as the world experiences some of the greatest challenges to human security in nearly 80 years. From record-high violent conflicts to an accelerating climate emergency. JICA's new timely analysis emphasizes the need for integrated policymaking to address complex threats. This resonates with the UNDP, and the UNDP has been advocating for it as well. With the support of key partners like Japan, we are joining the dots between the Sustainable Development Goals, assisting communities to obtain an education, gain a livelihood, and overcome poverty. We stay and deliver during crises and conflicts, supporting people most in need to gain freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom to live in dignity. Human security embodies the principle of solidarity, and no one is safe unless we are all safe. With the summit of the future on the horizon, let's agree that development remains an extraordinary platform for global cooperation, and we work hard to secure the future of people and the planet, not only for this generation, but the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haorin Shu and UNDP colleagues for your continuous collaboration. Next, we would like to show video messages from distinguished guests talking about the importance of human security actions. Please enjoy the video.
Trust is really core. And then the next question is, how do we build trust? One is societies that are too divided, too much inequality, it's going to be difficult to have trust. When there's too much insecurity, it's going to be hard to have trust. The system has failed in one way or another. And the second is a term I use very briefly, of voice. You can only have trust when you believe you are being heard, when you are treated with dignity.
What actions are you taking to create a society where people are empowered, protected, and can live in dignity?
Manaz Mustafavi, Chief of the United Nations Human Security Unit and the UN Trust Fund for Human Security. In the face of today's multi-layered crisis, be it climate catastrophes, conflict-induced displacement, or the specter of pandemics, business as usual is no longer possible. Through the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security, we are demonstrating that an alternative approach is possible, one grounded in a profound commitment to inclusivity and partnership. Our initiatives begin by bringing affected communities together with their local and national officials, community-based organizations, the private sector, and regional and global partners. They delve deeply to ascertain a disaggregated understanding of the obstacles to peace and prosperity and the challenges people face. They establish platforms for sustained dialogue and engagement among partners. This process fosters understanding and bolsters dedicated commitment to collaboration over time. It drives innovation and promotes comprehensive strategies, and it builds trust and solidarity. Together, these are the cornerstones for enduring resilience and societal transformation, where people are empowered, protected, and live in dignity. Thank you.
Namaste, Rajagopal from India, from Ekta Parishad. Ekta Parishad is basically an organization working for the marginalized communities. Early on, Mahatma Gandhi said that every action should lead to empowerment of the last person in the society. Based on that principle, the main task we were involved in was training young people, empowering them for nonviolent action. And in turn, these young people went back to villages, organized their communities, and took up actions. The main actions were around control and access to land and livelihood resources. And they also organized a long march to attract the attention of policymakers. And many years of action finally led to a negotiated settlement in terms of control over land and livelihood resources. And today, large number of indigenous people are enjoying the benefit of this land in order to continue to keep their life and culture going around land and livelihood resources. So our experience shows that the objectives set by SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, can be achieved, whether it is poverty eradication or environmental crisis, climate crisis, only when people take responsibility into their own hand and act upon. And we also believe that a bottom-up participatory method of development is much better than a top-down method as we experience today. Thank you very much.
I'm Joven Reyes. I am the Strategic Advisor on Women, Peace and Security and Climate Security of Sulong Peace Incorporated in the Philippines. Our world right now is dealing with polarization and chaos, and it is very important to look at the root causes of what is really happening right now. This is beyond armed conflict, resource-based conflict, or climate change. It is the persisting situations of the larger majority of our people who are experiencing discrimination, who lack spaces for their voices to be heard, the continuing violence against the women and other vulnerable groups, as well as the lack of opportunities for our people that remains poor. Expertise and analysis is very important in our work. But more than that, we believe that it is very important for us to provide safe spaces for the vulnerable sectors, for their voices to be heard, for them to express their situations and needs. And this should transcend into concrete actions and sustainable actions. And this can only be achieved if the people themselves, especially the vulnerable sectors, are part of the whole process of transformation.
Hello, my name is Ben Ricky. I am from Solomon Islands. I work in the Ministry of Health and Medical Services under the Solomon Island government, and I look after the healthy setting concept or health setting approach in the country. Really, our focus in health settings approach is to really deal with people's lives, especially in people's places where they live, learn, work, play, and worship. And this concept really deals with the root causes of problems that people face every day. And we try to promote environment and behavior change for people, especially where people live, and their behavior should be changed to protect their environment and also their health. Our main goal is to create preventative, protective, and supportive environments for better health.
Next, let me invite Professor Yoichi Mine, Executive Director of JICA Ogata Research Institute, for the keynote speech. Professor Mine, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. I'm Yoichi Mine, Executive Director of JICA Ogata Research Institute for Peace and Development. In this today's webinar, let me give a brief talk about how to accelerate the SDG and human security actions, referring to the latest issue of our flagship report on human security. Okay, Human Security Today, this is a report. The world today is facing multiple threats such as climate change, natural disasters, environmental degradation, pandemics, economic crisis, and violent conflicts. And all of these are threatening the life, livelihoods, and dignity of people worldwide. So later this month, in this context, in New York, the Summit of the Future will take place to adopt the Pact for the Future. Okay. The text of the latest draft released last week begins with an honest recognition of the seriousness and pervasiveness of the global crisis we face. Okay, the Pact for the Future, the draft states that we face rising catastrophic and existential risks, many of which are caused by the choices we make. So this also means that we may be able to avoid a future catastrophe and to pave the way for a better future, which depends on our own choices. So the choice is ours. Okay, now our institute, Ogata Institute, is named after the late Madame Sadako Ogata, former UN High Commissioner for Refugees. I have said this many times. Madame Ogata emphasized that our action and research should be based on the urgent needs on the ground. I remember her repeating the word urgency many times. So she was at the time thinking about the situations surrounding refugees in the 1990s. And today we have experienced the COVID crisis and the wars in Europe and the Middle East on top of the intensification of climate change. Then we need to recognize the nature of such global risks and crises. This figure is taken from the overview edition of our Human Security Report, as formulated by JICA's president, Dr. Akihiko Tanaka. The threats arising from the physical system, the living system, and the social system are intertwined. So we should respond to these complex global shocks effectively. As an article on financial risks in this report shows, discrete risks may reinforce each other, or risks in one system may trigger risks of another kind. When potential risks actualize, they may place enormous burdens on certain vulnerable populations while affecting people living in distant places. In our interconnected world, we need a systematic and systemic understanding of risks. So, how should we respond to all these challenges? In my talk, I'd like to raise 3 points. The first is to revisit and reaffirm our ideals. The second is to invest in measurement. The third is to take a field-oriented approach. Let me discuss in turn. And first, let me begin with the importance of universal ideals such as human security and dignity. As stated in the draft Pact for the Future, we aim at a world in which human well-being, security, and dignity, and a healthy planet are assured. So I believe that at the Summit of the Future, delegates of people will discuss issues that are not adequately addressed by the existing SDG framework. The issues will include STI and digital cooperation, AI, and development finance reform, and these are critically important, of course. But at the same time, I do not think that the main idea of the SDGs should be changed. So in this increasingly polarized world, we need to revisit global norms that can unite all parties. Okay. This is why we underscore the value of human security as well as human dignity as enshrined in the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Some people say the concept of human security is not easy to understand. So in the overview edition of our Human Security Report, we presented a diagram which explains the elements of human security. So human security is an agenda which ensures freedom from fear and freedom from want, along with freedom to live in dignity. So recently, the idea of human dignity has started to attract renewed attention through discussions on the dignity economy or the science of dignity and so on. In the practice of human security, community resilience is also emphasized. As a follow-up to the discussion in the first issue of the report entitled Revisiting Human Security, we also explain several concepts adjacent to the idea of human security. Okay. The United Nations is sometimes criticized for its poor performance in resolving global crises, but I believe a counterfactual world without the United Nations would be a miserable one. According to Japan's Development Cooperation Charter, Japan continues to position human security as a guiding principle. So within this framework, JICA actively promotes the idea of human security, which was originally advocated by UNDP, And I think this JICA's initiative is a welcome development for both the UN member states and the UN system per se. Okay, now the second topic is measurement. When it comes to the existing SDGs, there are more than 200 indicators, and no one remembers them all. So many indicators lack statistical data. Our Ogata Institute is conducting quantitative research to analyze the correlations between these numerous variables and is proposing a relatively small set of core indicators. If we can determine that improving indicator A, for example, will coincide with the improvement of the performance of indicator B, we can focus on measuring indicator A. So we will present the research results at some other time soon. We need to use reliable methods to measure the effectiveness of our action to realize SDGs and human security. We need to go beyond GDP. We need to measure people's subjective perceptions. We need to use GIS, the Geographic Information System, effectively. Measuring people's well-being and security and planetary health has been the subject of research around the OECD, led by Nobel Prize economist Joseph Stiglitz, originally with Professor Amartya Sen. So Professor Sen, together with Madame Ogata, established the concept of human security in 2003. And now Professor Stiglitz regularly visits our institute to guide our research and collaborate with us. The record of conversation between Professor Stiglitz and me is now available on the internet. I want you to skip the part of my remarks, honestly speaking, but Professor Stiglitz did give us valuable input on the question of measurement, as well as on the key role of trust and dignity. Measurement is not just to satisfy our intellectual curiosity, but to improve the quality of our practice. So JICA has developed thematic global agenda for all major development issues, which correspond to SDGs. JICA also maintains nearly 100 country offices all over the world and works in specific national and regional contexts. So we intend to use the concept of human security as a sort of common denominator for all these activities. We are thinking of developing JICA's own human security indicators to measure the effectiveness of our practice regularly. The third is the importance of the field-oriented perspective. In both the SDGs and human security, we should make a difference in places close to the people. To realize a society where no one is left behind, we need to know who are left behind and where they are, and improve conditions in the local communities where people live. In this context, the localized human security indicators as a tool for accelerating the achievement of SDGs have attracted attention. The UN Secretary General's report on human security, released in January 2024, reveals global, regional, national, and subnational actors for human security. In order to achieve a society where no one is left behind, Ambassador Yukio Takasu, the special advisor to the Secretary General on Human Security, developed subnational disaggregated human security indicators at the municipal level in Japan. Our institute produced the English versions, which are downloadable from our website. Last May, a symposium was held at UN headquarters to launch the localized indicators. Thank you, Pedro, for co-hosting this event. And we often talk about national averages, but we cannot work directly on the average. The national average will improve only when the performances improve in provinces, states, prefectures, districts, towns, and villages. In this context, we need to organize close cooperation between stakeholders and sectors at the community level. We know about the collective impact approach, where multiple actors share a vision, coordinate activities, and evaluate results together while maintaining their autonomy. Our report, Human Security Report, includes a case study of the health and nutrition sector, which discusses ways in which actors cooperate to maximize collective impact, taking the example of Solomon Islands and others. JICA's Development Cooperation, Japan's Development Cooperation Charter emphasizes the significance of solidarity, trust, and co-creation of values. JICA's President Tanaka, in conversation with Professor Mary Caballero Anthony, discussed the importance of building trust among multiple stakeholders in normal times in order to organize effective action in emergencies. So many lessons can be learned from our practice in the field. JICA is now trying to collect and present narratives which represent good practices in human security. The compounded crises that surround us are serious, pervasive, and complex. As highlighted in the UNDP's special report on human security, the new threats require greater solidarity. And as I mentioned, acknowledging their severity will be the starting point for the discussion at the Summit of the Future. In addition to the SDGs, the summit will discuss about additional action on climate change, youth engagement, digital technologies, restructuring development finance, and the UN reform. So there will be discussions about how to mainstream the voices of Africa and marginalized regions and vulnerable populations, and how to strengthen their representation in the global systems. Effective regulatory regimes will also be discussed at the summit. At the same time, we'd like to emphasize once again the importance of reaffirming the common values of humanity. We believe that the importance of the SDGs principles, human security and dignity, to realize a society in which no one is left behind will be an essential part of the upcoming discussions in New York and beyond. So we should overcome divisions which affect all of us. At the last slide, our Human Security Report, Human Security Today, is published regularly in Japanese and English. Our commitment to human security must be clear when you see the fact that our reports are not a standalone publication, but a series of reports. So this second issue on compounded crisis is already available for download from our website. You can get both the overview edition and the full report. So we hope that you will take a look, and we look forward to your feedback. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mine, and please turn off your camera. Next, let's move on to the panel discussion. Let me introduce our 4 panelists for today. Dear panelists, when I call your name and introduce you to the floor, please turn on your camera one by one. First, Ambassador Kirsten Stauer, Chair of the OECD Development Assistance Committee, Dr. Pedro Conceição, Director of the UNDP Human Development Report Office, Professor Siripon Pachawalk, Professor of Thammasat University, Mr. Shohei Hara, Senior Vice President of JICA, and the moderator today will be Ms. Chie Miyahara, Director General of JICA Ogata Research Institute. After the presentations and discussion by the panelists, we will pick up some of the questions from the floor and directly move on to the Q&A session. So during the discussion, please send your questions to the panelists with Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom. Now, let us start. Ms. Miyahara, over to you. Thank you for your introduction, Saito-san. So let's start panel discussion. Thank you all the distinguished panelists for participating in this webinar today, while you are in a very, very busy schedule. Anyway, during the panel discussion, we would like to discuss 2 questions in 40 minutes, following Q&A and some summary comments. So as all speakers so far touched upon, no one disagrees that we are facing multiple threats. It includes climate change, natural disasters, pandemics, economic crisis, inflation, violent conflict, and so on. Also, we all know that achieving SDG targets by 2030 are becoming more and more difficult tasks. So my first question is, despite facing common threats and approaching the SDG target year of 2030, the international community seems to be increasingly polarized, hindering collective efforts to achieve the agreed goals and targets. What do you see as the problems, and how do you think we can address them? Is my question. So each panelist have 5 minutes to respond to this question. So shall I invite Ambassador Carsten Stauer, Chair of the OECD DAC first? Ambassador Stauer, thank you for joining today. So floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to join, for organizing this excellent webinar, very timely. There's no doubt that human security and fragility are compounded among the most vulnerable populations, those who are falling most behind reaching the SDGs. Let me start by highlighting a few worrying factors. I think we have seen the largest number of violent conflicts since 1946. We are living in a much more violent world than we used to. We see 73% of the world's extreme poor live in contexts exposed to high and extreme fragility. Not one of the 60 fragile countries which we categorize in the OECD are on track to achieve the SDGs related to hunger, to good health, and to gender equality, all of which have been critically affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And against this backdrop, of course, like members, official development assistance for peace building have dropped to a 15-year record low in 2021, a level that frankly does not appear to be commensurate with the mounting peace-building needs. So we have a number of huge challenges, and it's clearly a combined challenge for the international donor community. And it speaks to the point that many of the challenges affected with pursuit of SDGs were not generally anticipated when we adopted them in 2015. The rise in violence and armed conflict not foreseen, increasing economic challenges related to high cost of borrowing, or the growing global competition for FDI. Also, progress on SDG 5 on achieving gender equality and empowerment of women is extremely important in our context, both as a goal in itself and because of its potential to drive sustainable and transformative change across other SDGs. The latest OECD data show that only 43% of bilateral official development assistance by DAC members had gender equality as part of their policy objectives, and only 4% as a primary objective. ODA remains a vital, stable financing resource for better human security outcomes, especially in fragile contexts. But we need to better tailor our financing to the need of fragile contexts, of fragile countries. Overall, in the context of approaching the SDG target year of 2030, we might now see an element of policy and framework fatigue that highlights the need for significant political regeneration to face new and emerging challenges. This is hopefully what the Summit of the Future in New York later this month will start to address. In the new geostrategic context, this will also mean building new institutional on SDGs, especially at political level. Effectively communicating the value of multilateralism is an essential part of this effort. It's not just about responding to the dramatic communication changes enabled by the digital revolution. It's also about reinvigorating political networks at a personal level in a politically fragmented environment. The strategic gap between development and peace policy is a key fault line for human insecurity that necessitates joined-up development and peace strategies. Bridging the divide between development and peace actions is essential for Agenda 2030 and SDGs, including through conflict-sensitive engagements on issues of economic fragility. Finally, we need new and smarter partnerships, as highlighted by the OECD analysis of operating in politically constrained environments. Deciding on which local partners to engage with requires a good understanding of the dynamics of the political economy and how to manage the dilemmas posed in this context, where national priorities may not be in line with SDGs and state institutions can lack international recognition or legitimacy. Addressing this need for new and smarter partnership will be an essential step in our collective efforts to achieve the greater goals and targets and to move towards human security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Stour. I agree that the compounded crisis not evenly affect all populations. I mean, vulnerable people have more severe impact, and we need to pay special attention to these people. Gender equality is also a critical factor from human security perspectives. We may touch upon HDP nexus later on the discussion, but the political level partnership is a critical aspect too. I assume UNDP maybe built some discussion points on that aspect. So next, I would like to invite Dr. Pedro Conceição, Director of the UNDP Human Development Report Office. So Dr. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for UNDP to co-host this webinar and to join the panelists and see many friends on the screen participating in this discussion. So maybe I'll share some thoughts that are associated with our latest Human Development Report. And I would start by giving a number that we found very, very striking. And it relates to the pervasiveness of perceptions of insecurity that we live in a world where that people perceive as being a world that is generating insecurities. We found that 6 out of every 7 people around the world perceive living in a world of insecurity. And I start with this because our analysis suggests that perceptions of insecurity are associated with at least 3 of the themes that are addressed in the Summit of the Future. And I'll come to your question at the end related to polarization, which is one of these themes. So we found that the more insecure people feel, the less they trust others. So trust, lack of trust in each other, in institutions, it's one of the key drivers for the convening of the Summit of the Future. This is also echoed in the comments that we heard from Joe Stiglitz earlier. So perceptions of insecurity drive lack of trust. Secondly, perceptions of insecurity are associated with the fact that people feel less in control of their lives. Now, feeling in control of one's lives is something very important to this notion of empowerment or agency that is critical and central to human development. We often put an emphasis on well-being as the main focus of policies, of development cooperation, and of course that is very important. But I think over time we have neglected, perhaps because we took it for granted. We just assumed that as we improve people's well-being, people's agency, this idea of being in control of their lives would come along. But what the evidence suggests is that's not necessarily the case. And in fact, it has worsened to the extent to which people feel insecure. So more insecure people feel less in control of their lives, so that they have less agency to shape their lives and their future. And then third, and this brings me to polarization, we found that more insecure people feel the more attracted they are to the extremes of the political spectrum, both on the left and on the right. So this means that insecurity is something that drives polarization, to get to your question, and something that does not really have an ideological bent to it. What we see is that insecurity drives people to extremes and tends to polarize societies. Now, polarization is something that is very concerning because it's not about people having different views on policy priorities or on what should be done. It's about people segregating themselves into groups that find very little ability to communicate with one another and to come together. And I think this is one of the central challenges that we are confronting in many societies today, within countries, and also within the international community. So the corollary of all of this is that if the analysis is correct, that perceptions of insecurity are associated with lack of trust, not having a sense of agency, and polarization, reducing these perceptions of insecurity would be one of the ways in which we could achieve at least three of the fundamental goals of the Summit of the Future, which is to restore trust, give people a sense of agency and hope for the future, and ease political polarization. And so I'll conclude by sharing the conviction, therefore, that investing in human security, in advancing human security, is a way to redressing these perceptions of insecurity. And I think we've heard from President Tanaka and from Yoichi many concrete and specific ideas as to how this can be achieved. So I hope that I was able to portray the importance of advancing human security as something obviously intrinsically in itself, but something that is particularly relevant in the world that we live today, as a means to enhance trust, ease polarization, and give people more sense of agency and hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pedro, for your analysis about the current polarized world and its impact on the human security and what human security can do. And you have touched upon several very important points about the people's feeling of insecurity, lack of trust, and lack of sense of agency. These are the points maybe we can discuss later on the panel discussions or exchange of ideas. So I think some of the agency issues can lead to Professor Shiripon's discussion maybe. So I'd like to invite Professor Shiripon Wachawaruk, Professor of Thammasat University, Thailand. Professor Shiripon, thank you so much for joining today. Your thoughts to the question from your academic career perspective would be valuable input to our discussion. So floor is yours, Professor Shiripon, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to join this interesting and important webinar today. To respond to your question, actually, I think there are three problems which are interrelated. Let me start by the first one. I think it's the fact that now we are living in the international community in which sovereign states are members. Therefore, we cannot deny the role of state as the main actors. So the point is that how we look at the state and how state behave, whether the state is a part of the problem or whether state is a part of the solution. Put it simply, I think it is the point that is the problem related to the political will view and also political commitment of the leaders of the state. To some extent, I think it's necessary to convince political leaders to pursue and keep their commitment on the human security, which will contribute to the policy priority of the state to make balance between national security and also human security. I think the case of ASEAN members may be interesting. As ASEAN, as you know, ASEAN members that generally pay high attention to national security due to their historical background. However, recently, people-centeredness or people-centered ASEAN has been emphasized, and to some extent, it could be interpreted as embracing the concept of human security. However, in practice, I think we still see some difficulties in implementation of the human security in terms of policy and also development project to, incorporate that ideas and transform it into the project at the practical level, at the local level. So I think the balance between national security and human security in many ASEAN countries still a critical issue for us. The second point, why we said that state might be the part of the problems, I think we also should look at other actors in the society as well. For example, the civil society, the local authorities and communities. I think that limited stakeholder engagement as well as less active civil society may be a part of the problem as well. So we should not rely on state alone, but we should strengthen the civil society at the same time. The third point, my last point, I think localize the concept as well as emphasize the implementation at local level with the involvement of local actors are very, very important. I'm not sure that at this stage we have done enough, particularly localize the concept into the local level. I think this may be the key point if we are going to strengthen and promote human security to achieve SDG in the near future. So I think that is all from my view at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shipon. Human security is one of the non-traditional security, and I think human security can connect civil society, local government, community, and higher political sphere, I believe. So also the policy priority is a point which Ambassador Starr also pointed out. We have too many goals to achieve, and what will be the priority, how we can work together is the point, I assume. We need to listen to the voices of the field at the same time, as Professor Mine talked about at the keynote speech. So lastly but not least, I would like to invite our Senior Vice President, Mr. Hara. So could you give us your reaction to the question?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Shohei Hara, Senior Vice President of JICA. Let me just briefly introduce myself. I started my career with the Overseas Economic Cooperation Fund, and throughout my career for beyond 30 years, my concentration area, my specialties are like infrastructure as well as lending operations. And though I spent some years in Iraq, I think for many of you, Iraq is a hotspot of human security. But during my days in Iraq, my portfolio was mainly in the power sector, as well as some of the water supply schemes. And in those days, I tend to think that human security is some issue related to the humanitarian issues, and the issue is looked after by the humanitarian agencies. So I must confess that I'm still a layman to this discussion. But at the same time, I participated in the formulation of a revised development cooperation charter last year with the Japanese government, as well as, having this occasion, I have learned quite a lot about the human security. So let me give, with this background, let me give a general response first. And many of what I will be saying will be echoing other speakers. So behind the polarizing world, there are uncertainties and insecurities about the future. And these days, increasingly, such uncertainties and insecurities are becoming visible among many people across the border through various communication tools. In this environment, people face various threats and their dignity is threatened. In order for us to understand the negative effects of efforts towards achieving the SDGs, it is quite essential to understand the issues from the people's perspective and consider ways to address them. The perspective of human security, which captures issues comprehensively, is quite useful in fostering a common understanding among various stakeholders about the threats people are facing and countermeasures that should be taken as a priority in translating this into action. So these are the general reaction to the question. And let me add some personal observation. As I said, I'm still a layman, or I'm rather, practitioner on the field. So from the practitioner's perspective, still the human security appears to be something like quite a difficult philosophy. Looks quite philosophical, conceptual, and multifaceted. So it's rather difficult to understand for the practitioners. But at the same time, I would say, on the other hand, the multifaceted nature of the human security means that there are many entry points for the human security. And especially for the, say, issues like insecurity, is increasingly felt among many people, not only in developing countries or the fragile countries, but also in the advanced economies, urban, dwellers, and many people are feeling insecurity in their daily life. So by exploiting such multifaceted nature of human security, I think we can have many occasions. We should be having many occasions of discussing the many aspects of human security. And by doing so, we can make the human security as our own issue. In Japanese, we call it as a jibungoto. By doing so, we can have the opportunities of thinking about people in the distant areas, as well as the threats and suffer they are experiencing, by nurturing the opportunities of empathies. So this is very much important. This occasion, especially towards the future summit, is very much important for us to discuss and renew our understanding about the human security. And as I said, I participated in the formulation of a revised development cooperation charter by the Japanese government, and it reaffirmed that the human security will be the guiding principle for all the development cooperation by the Japanese government, as well as by JICA. So this is, I think, the vision of the development cooperation charter itself was a good communication point for us to reaffirm our commitment to the human security. My last word is about, increasingly the private sector is achieving many things in the, solving the social issues. And especially we are now, approaching or trying to enhance our sustainable finance tools, blended finance tools, etc. And I think in communicating with the business sector or the private sector, I think human security with a richer set of narratives and cases may become a common language with the business sector, so that we can have a much wider impact to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hara, for sharing your experiences with human security issues and Japanese government involvement or commitment to human security. And you also have pointed out very important points that human security is not only for the developing world, but I mean, it is relevant for the people's insecurity, even in developing countries, in developed countries like Japan and the US and other European countries. Thank you very much for the panelists to answer the first questions. I think now we figure out various problems or issues we are relating human security and attaining the SDG goals, and what kind of issues we are facing and how to address them. So we need to focus on the voices of vulnerable people and participation of them to tackle poverty alleviation and ease the impact of compounded crisis and easing the insecurity of people's daily life. Also, the polarization hinders collective actions or cooperation, and how to prioritize our long list of goals is another challenge. In addition to, we discuss a bit about how to finance them. Gender equality is also still a very long way to go, and we face some emerging issues on new geopolitics, which we did not expect in 2015. Climate change cannot be stopped while human beings are still fighting each other on the ground. So maybe we can also touch upon the humanitarian development peace nexus issues in the next part. So based on the responses to all the panelists to the first question, and to develop our discussions further, I would like to pose my second question, which is, what actions we take for the achievement of SDGs and for ensuring human security? I would like to first invite DAC Chair Ambassador Starr to, so Ambassador, how would you respond to this question? Floor is yours, Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. And of course, this is a $50,000 or more $50 billion question, because if we can do this and point to a very easy shortcut towards the attainment of the SDGs, and I don't think we can do that. But let me look at it from two different angles, from a political, more strategic level, and then the policy level. And to be very brief here, because this is a huge discussion, 3 points on political strategic level. The first one is that the SDG ecosystem of policies and frameworks must adapt to attain its relevance. I thought about last time on political regeneration. I think that would be essential as a component of that process. We simply need to bring back political leaders into the room. That hopefully what the Summit of the Future, the upcoming financing for development, for conference and civil next year will do. That will be essential. We have lost a lot of momentum since 2015, and we need to regenerate action. The second point is that new approaches to communicating action and SDGs are also essential. The marketplace of ideas and values are more competitive than ever, with new and more powerful platforms amplifying messages to targeted audiences. As a community of donors like the DAC, we should question the effectiveness of what we have done, and we should be open to new approaches to ensure that the value of development, peace, and multilateralism is both understood and made resilient in a politically fragmented environment. The third point is that bridging the divide between development and peace actions is essential for 2027. Geopolitical realities demand more joined-up development and peace strategies. The siloed approach of recent decades is not effective for addressing the complexity of multiple challenges from human society, from human security to biodiversity loss. And those that are most behind on SDGs have fallen even more behind. So that will be on a very high level of reflection. At policy level, I'll go back to the recently publicized OECD Development Cooperation Report, which came out mid-July, that highlights 4 policy actions related to human security. First is, we need to boost the effectiveness of available financing by better integrating poverty reduction and climate in program design and evaluation. Climate, poverty, and inequality, those are one agenda. They're not 2 different agendas. Second is that we must build capacity in developing countries' tax systems to enhance domestic resource mobilization. Third, we have to expand skills and development of digital women, to increase their participation in labor markets and their ability to participate in and benefit from the green transformation. And fourth, we must foster inclusive labor markets, decent work conditions by supporting labor formalization and collective bargaining rights. Those are four among a number of potential elements that we could highlight, but in our view, these are some of the key building blocks as we move forward. For its part, the OECD DAC will continue to push for more integrated approaches that advance human security, prevention, and also bridge the development peace divide in line with the 2019 OECD DAC recommendation on the HCP nexus. This includes the promotion of thinking and dialogue on development and peace through the forthcoming State of Fertility 2025 report, which will be published in the spring of next year. Then finally, I want to float a question to everyone in this space to continue thinking about. And if so, how can we take risks for more effective collective action across the humanitarian development peace nexus? And partner government and other partners be empowered to better prioritize and lead their policy and programming, especially in complex situations where everything seems to be a priority. And make this point because there's an area where we do see that fragile context also means less government voice, less government agency in some of these areas. The rest of the world takes over. I think that's one of the things that we need to address when we move forward on this agenda. And of course, I look forward to the discussion and further dimensions in this and also the Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Stour, for giving us hints from policy level perspective and also giving us another question we can discuss further later. Personally, I would like to develop your third point, if we have time, about HDP Nexus, but JICA as a development agency, we have been tackling the issue of HDP Nexus for a long time. Also, as Professor Mine introduced, we also put more importance of getting out of silos. So I think these are the points you have raised, very important for all the practice implementing agencies. Thank you very much for your points. Anyway, due to some time constraints, I would like to listen to Professor Shippon's reaction to the question number 2. So Shippon Sensei, floor is yours.
Okay, yeah. For the second question, actually, I divided into 2 groups for the question. First, I think as the first question, I think that maybe the civil society and local authorities, the local authority, local communities should be more, should be more equipped or empowered. So I think the first point that I would like to respond in the second question is that the activities that we can promote the role of the civil society, particularly the local civil society that work with the local people. I think this is the most important point. It's necessary to provide more opportunities for those NGOs to take part in the decision-making process, particularly at the important policy and the policy which have direct effect to their life. In some developing countries, I think the attitude or the perception of the government towards NGOs or civil society is also very important. We have to some extent, to convince the government to change the attitude or the perception of the civil society and provide more opportunities for them to work on together. Local communities, as I said, to some extent, it may be very difficult for them to understand, let's say, human security concept or SDG or whatsoever. But at the end, they are the person who will receive the benefit or maybe in risk of the insecurity. So I think we have to continue dialogue with them, engage them in the process of development. I think this is one part. The second part that I would like to focus to respond to the second question is the next generation. I think the youth, I come from the university, and in order to make people in the future to understand and realize the importance of the human security and SDG, we have to give them more information, more opportunities for them to understand and engage with the policymaker or with the people who work on these issues. For example, mainstream these concepts into the curriculum, into the education policy or the system maybe is important. We have the case in ASEAN. In the past, not so many people understood about ASEAN, but the government of member states put this subject into the school, into the curriculum, university curriculum, and that helped. So I think to push the concept of human security and SDG forward and to materialize it at the local level, I think it's necessary to target the youth and also help them to understand it, make it as a part of their lives. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sipon, and pointing out about the importance of local involvement and local participation of human security and also the SDG targets. Ambassador Storup explained about the national level and international level, and you pointed about the local level. And also, I would very much appreciate you pointing out about the importance of involving youth and younger generations of the future. I think that the next generation will be a keyword for the future, and I believe Summit of the Future also focusing on the youth and next generation. So for local participation, one of the maybe issue we have to solve is that how the progress of SDG in the local level, and also how the human security is shared, the idea of human security is shared, should be measured at first, so that we can proceed with what we can do at the local level. At the same time, how we can involve the youth into our collective actions. Thank you very much. Here, I would like to invite Mr. Hara. We talk about policy level and civil society level to achieve the SDGs and ensure human security. And JICA, as an implementing agency, we have a lot of examples of our intervention which exemplifies its human security concept. So, Mr. Hara, could you please share your thoughts about question 2 and how JICA is approaching its human security on the ground? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, as pointed out, JICA has plenty of cases, and I think we can make our very good contribution to enriching the narratives towards the SDGs as well as for the human security. So the report, published report, highlights on health and nutrition case in Solomon Islands. And let me take in this opportunity to focus on the disaster risk reduction and infrastructure. So first, please put the slide on this Turkish case. Yeah, okay. So first is about Turkey. Turkey, as well known to many of you, is one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the world. And it's quite, I think you remember quite well about the big earthquake in the southeastern part of the country in 2023, and where the nearly 50,000 lives were lost. And for Turkey, since the 90s, JICA has been providing cooperation in a wide range of areas. So prevention, including earthquake and seismic engineering, earthquake observation technology, and disaster prevention planning and training for the government officials. As well known, the earthquakes are a typical example of downside risks that once they occur can cause great damage to the people's lives and livelihood. Japan's cooperation has been historically focusing on the human security through various tools like technical cooperation, grant assistance, and concessional lending. Some of the outcomes of technical cooperation has been adopted by the Turkish government as the national earthquake resistance standards. One of the characteristics of Japan's earthquake disaster prevention assistance to Turkey or to other countries is that it puts into practice of the comprehensiveness, one of the principles of the human security. And effective disaster prevention and countermeasures require not only one sector or one ministry, but by various sectors and various levels, including central, local, and municipality level governments. For this reason, cooperation has been promoted through wide-ranging partnerships with various government agencies and research institutes that handle various issues related to earthquake disaster prevention. Such cooperation also involves very important element of solidarity. In working with the Turkish counterparts, Japanese cities like Kobe and Sendai, you may remember these cities suffered quite badly of the earthquakes. These Kobe and Sendai municipalities and their citizens, they shared their own experiences and also provided direct support to the earthquake orphans in Turkey. Such solidarity and empathies over a very long distance has a very good case for human security. And it also reminds us of the tremendous support and good wishes we received from all over the world at the time of the Great East Japan earthquake. So this is about disaster risk prevention case in Turkey. Another case, please put another slide for Bangladesh. Yeah, well, I try to be very much brief. For the human security, I think the relationship between human security and infrastructure improvement is less talked about. And I think there are, ample scope for scaling up between the linkage between the security, human security and infrastructure. And infrastructure is a very much multifaceted, multi-stakeholder, and it empowers weaker sections of the society, prevents the disaster risks, and enhances resilience to counter especially threats from the physical system in the current situation of the climate change and etc. So in the context of the climate change, the slide describes about our cooperation in Bangladesh towards the southern lowland area called as Haor in the northeastern part of Bangladesh, which suffers quite, annually they suffer the flash flood from, actually it's a kind of a cross-border flash flood from Indian territory. And as a result of these flash flood, their crops, mainly rice, are damaged, and their income level are very much insecure. So in order to overcome this, the situation, JICA has been contributing to Bangladesh in construction of infrastructure, which is necessary for the prevention of such, disasters, as well as at the same time we are, empowering the local communities for their better livelihood. And good story about this is the basic designs and approaches for the local community. Basic designs for the infrastructure, as well as the methodologies used for the local community empowerment. These designs are adopted by other donors and the government itself. So the infrastructure cooperation, along with the empowering the people, has a good, room for scaling up and a good place for solidarity among the many partners. And well, I may say that this flash flood is caused by a cross-border, flood from Indian territory. So it's quite ambitious to say, but there is a scope of cross-border cooperation as well in the future. That's a big agenda for us to tackle. And well, having worked in the infrastructure area for so long, I feel that we tend, we means development practitioners tend to focus on engineering, procurement, and implementation of the infrastructure projects. And we pay less attention to the users or beneficiaries of infrastructure. And I think we need to refocus for more on people-centered approach in planning as well as operation stages of infrastructure. There are many cases, well, I would like to carry on, but I think I'm speaking too long. But there are many cases of, empowering the ladies' movements in cities like Delhi or Dhaka, or in other cities through our cooperation. But I think I'll cut it short here. I'm very much encouraged to see the recent working paper by our colleagues in the JICA Ogata Research Institute about the female users' views about the public transportation system in Manila. There are many, things we can think of about the relationship between the human security and the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hara, for sharing how we operationalize human security on the ground and putting the importance on the relationship between the infrastructure project and human security, which sounds a little bit new to all the audience today, maybe. As the same implementation agency in the UN system and as a leader of the human security, I would like to lastly invite Dr. Pedro to share your thoughts. So, Dr. Pedro, floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I could be very brief because I agree with everything that has been said before. I think Ambassador Stour made a very good reference to the recent report. It's a great report that I would recommend, and you're also very much missed in New York, Ambassador Stour, certainly in UNDP and beyond. Also, the very concrete cases of President Hara and the focus on community-level engagement of Professor Siri Porn. So I think that maybe my reflection would be to share that I think we need to bear in mind that some of the threats that we confront looking into the future have less to do with what we can do, right or wrong, within countries, and more how we collectively address global challenges. So I'll just give two examples that I think are obvious to all of us when looking back and when looking forward. So if we look back, you can imagine a situation of a country that had implemented all the policies in the right way, had no resource constraints, had received all the resources needed to implement those right policies, and still confronted the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So no matter how well-resourced, policies well implemented, well designed, we are still beset with the challenge of confronting a pandemic. No country can address a pandemic of the one that we lived through on its own. Looking ahead, and Ambassador Stour made a reference to this, one of the greater drivers of inequalities in human development, not only in income, but in human development, in things like mortality rates, for instance, has to do with the implications of climate change. So again, no matter how much we invest today in resourcing countries, in giving them the resources to implement the right policies to reduce poverty, hopefully eliminate poverty, that is something that is beyond the control of any single country to manage. And I think the difference that we have today compared to other reflections on this interdependence of global challenges is that these challenges have not only a global nature, where countries can make policies on how much they are open to this interdependence, to trade flows, for instance, or to capital flows, or to the movement of people, but are associated with a planetary reality that we all share, that we cannot avoid. And so that's why in our special report on human security, we introduced this notion of solidarity in addition to protection and empowerment, because protection and empowerment is something that you can do at the local level, something that you can do at the national level, and it's important, and we need to do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but that might not be enough in a context in which we find these processes of planetary change that call upon a level of collective action that transcends what we can do within countries. So in our latest Human Development Report, we refer to the notion of global public goods, which is another lens and approach that can encapsulate these kind of challenges. So it's not only about looking at how to provide national public goods, the infrastructure that Vice President Hara mentioned. All of that is important, but how do we also find ways of investing in the global public goods that are required for us to be able to manage these planetary challenges? I think this is the question that we need to reflect upon, and it's perhaps a frontier of the kind of engagements, financial instruments that we need to think about to enable us to provide these global public goods. And hopefully, even if the language of global public goods is not used in the Summit of the Future, the spirit of these challenges is very much present in the discussions and in debates that are taking place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pedro. And sorry for my mismanagement of the time, but we have only 2 minutes left, and I would like to wanted to further develop the discussions between the panelists and focusing on the question raised by Ambassador Stoll. But maybe I would like to take one question from the floor, and there is a question: what are the roles of women in the overcoming polarization from your perspectives? So I would like to ask Ambassador Stoll, you mentioned about the importance of gender inequality, and if you have any thoughts about the role of women for this polarized world.
Thank you very much. And of course, I mentioned, I think in both my answers, I referred to gender inequality, the need to move forward on to improve equality for women and girls in economic terms, but also, of course, in political terms. We have seen the role of women in peace processes over recent decades. In some cases, they have been well functioning and being able to move forward as a political force in peace negotiations. In other cases, not so much. But I do think that gender equality and the involvement of women in all sorts of life, both in economic activity, in political activity, giving voice to them, to their concerns, will be a factor that will contribute very much to resilience and to stability in countries. And also, the whole notion here is to be sure that that agenda is a cross-cutting one across what we do. There, of course, is a lot of necessity to do things targeted to improve the situation of women and girls, but we also need to have it as a cross-cutting element at which we have been working on for years. And we have been successful in some cases and not in others. But I do think that especially on the whole issue of integrating the humanitarian development peace nexus, that the role of women thinking of, we have been fairly successful, I think, in integrating humanitarian development nexus. It's the peace element that gives us problems, and which seems a bit, the community of practice around peace it's different from the ones around development and humanitarian. And that's an area where the role of women in terms of bringing conflicts to an end, in terms of creating viable peace structures and the culture of peace after conflict, I think can be very, very important. So I think we just need to move forward on that again.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Stour. Maybe if I can ask one question to Dr. Pedro, relating to the Ambassador Stour's comment on how can we, and if so, how can we take risks for more effective collective action across the humanitarian development peace nexus? And I think you mentioned about the global public goods, and the collective action is very needed to tackle with maybe unpredicted future threats. And we have been working together in the international arena to work closely with different actors and inviting participation of civilians and the women and those kind of things. But how do you think that we can really go forward to move the collective actions in this polarized world and in the multiple threats we are facing?
Thank you. Well, I think conceptually we know what we need to do, and that has been asserted many times. I'm reminded of a joint United Nations World Bank report called Pathways for Peace that was published some 10 years ago or so, or 5 years ago or so, that already had a reflection on what we need to do conceptually. So I think the one of the key findings of that report, of that analysis, is the importance of not separating issues. So often we have contexts in which you have development actors present in a country, say, and then if a crisis occurs, then humanitarian actors take precedence. If the crisis is associated with violent conflict, peace actors come into play. And that report and much analysis before and since has argued for the importance of having this more joined up approach. And I think the HDP Nexus is also another expression of the importance of having this more integrated approach. Where I think we are still falling short is the difficulty in implementing in practice this conceptual approach that everybody seems to agree upon. And the challenges here are manifold. Sometimes they might be bureaucratic, related to the different interests and incentives that different organizations face and confront, maybe political, related to the space that these organizations are given, maybe financial, associated with the way in which different organizations are financed and are able to get support, public support, financial support from governments, but also broader support from the public. So I think it's more about the nuts and bolts of how to make this work in practice than as having to figure out what we need to do conceptually. So in that sense, I think I agree with Ambassador Stour that it's more about risks, taking risks. People in positions of power, in leadership, will have to take risks individually and collectively to find ways of implementing these joined up approaches that all the evidence suggests are required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pedro. And collective action is one is international arena, but at the same time we have to work together with the civil societies and academics, and we have to gather all these knowledges and practices from different parts of the society. So I would like to ask Professor Schilbrunn how these actors in local level and civil society level to work together with the national and international level, if you have any hints or thoughts about it.
Thank you, Ka. I think having dialogue at several levels may be very important at this moment. You know, at the policy level, maybe it involves policy makers. Of course, recently track to the academic has also involved in the policy making process. But I think if we can think about local people and local government and try to provide more dialogue that they can, say their demands, that would be important. But at the same time, I think the perspectives are different from the international perspective. They look at their daily life, I think, at the local level. So in order to strengthen them and look at a wider perspective over our wider issue, maybe we also need to provide information to them first. So I think there are two steps. First, we provide more information to them, and then at the second step, we involve them in the dialogue, in the policy making process.
Thank you very much, Professor Shirpon. And I know the time is already over, but I would like to take another question from the floor. This is the last question, and we're going to summarize about the discussions at the end. So the question is, Malawi is one of the countries that have perpetually suffered unprecedented consequences of any disaster, rendering many, especially women and vulnerable groups, pushed further to deep suffering and disarrayed situations. This is happening when several Malawians have benefited from the JICA-supported trainings on disaster risk reduction. Is there anything missing in the package to reduce, minimize impacts of the natural disaster that often come in different and unexpected forms? It's a little bit difficult question, but I just wonder if Mr. Hara can respond to the question.
Thank you very much. This is a super difficult question. Well, I try. Saying even in case of Turkey, JICA and Japan has been engaged for quite a long time for disaster risk prevention, as well as preparedness and the minimization of the risks. While doing so, the Turkey has experienced a number of earthquakes from time to time. And sadly, even in 2023, they had quite a large loss of lives. So, these, I don't put everything to the uncertainties or the unexpectedness, but national calamities, especially the earthquake, as well as the climate changes, going beyond our usual, the mode of expectation or the forecast. So I think the key is that the JICA's involvement, intervention, or the cooperation may not be able to solve everything and may not, prepare completely for the unexpected future. But one thing I think we can say is that we have a very long association and long engagement with many of the partner countries. So even in Japan, we are experiencing number of natural calamities from time to time, and we are going beyond these sad cases and learn from the experiences. So long association and engagement with our partners, as well as learning process, continued learning process to overcome the issues unexpected would be the key for overcoming such situations. I'm not quite sure whether I'm responding properly to your question, but that's what I thought as a response to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hara, for responding to these very difficult questions. The time is coming to the end, and thank you very much for your very active involvement in the panel discussions and sharing your thoughts with the audience today and other participants. And before closing, I would like to ask Professor Mine for his reaction to our discussion. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, Mr. Professor Mine, please.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think many important issues have been raised in this panel discussion, which was very nicely moderated by Ms. Miyahara. Thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to make a few closing remarks based on the discussion. So please give me just maybe 3 minutes. So the first is about the importance of trustful dialogue, which comes to be is a kind of keyword to today's discussion. So there are many different kinds of dialogue, such as between public servants and civil society, and development agencies and the private sector, or peace actors and development actors, and so on. So, and one thing I would like to point out is that human security was born out of a dialogue between politics and economics, so to speak. Madam Ogata and Professor Amartya Sen represented humanitarian and developmental positions respectively. And the idea of global public goods suggested by Pedro today has originated in economics, but expanded to the broader field of policy making. So I believe that we can forge institutional resilience to polarization by getting out of our silos of specialties and continuing to produce something together. Okay. So the next is about the role of government. It may sound a bit ironic, but I wanted to mention the role of the national government precisely because human security is important. In the second issue of our human security report, we discussed the compounded crisis as our main topic. But there are also a couple of articles, important articles, which focus on human security governance, participatory national human security governance. Democratic government is a truly strong government which can protect the security of every individual effectively. So we need to give support to the capacity development of government institutions in order not to make ex post intervention, but to prevent conflict. So democratic and effective government matters. So the final point relates to representativeness. So I think it is critically important not only to listen to the voices of vulnerable people, but also to mainstream the aspirations of those who are marginalized and to make them fully participate in decision making. So to use a biblical phrase, the last shall be first. So we should give voice to the future generations and continue gender mainstreaming effort, which is badly needed in Japanese society. So I believe that we should realize a substantial change in the modality of decision-making in big and small institutions, from village councils to the UN and global financial bodies. So the point is that fair representation is important. At the same time, it's a tricky point, but the representation is related to taxation. Anyway, so thank you all for participating in this webinar. Our theme was the Summit of the Future and Beyond. So, and JICA will continue to work with other donors, OECD and UNDP, and the people of ASEAN to advance SDGs and human security. So as indicated by Mr. Hara, human security has a lot of entry points. So today we stand at the start line, so for further collaboration. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mine. Now we would like to close today's seminar. All the speakers today, thank you for your valuable contributions. To all the participants, thank you very much for joining today's seminar. We sincerely hope that the seminar has helped to enhance discussion on how best to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs through human security perspectives. Now we are closing this Zoom session. Thank you again and have a nice day.